Good evening. I would like to thank A Bird's Eye View for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts regarding my MEP candidacy. Bird's Eye View gave me 14 questions to answer. I'll be reading out the questions and giving my answer to those same questions immediately afterwards. This interview will be in English at their request. Question number 1 was, with discussions underway for the legalization of recreational marijuana, what is your opinion on such legislation, and if the EU had to intervene to stop us from legalizing recreational marijuana after it was passed in Maltese Parliament, how would you act? Keeping in mind Malta would be the first EU country to legalize recreational marijuana use. Right. Personally, I believe that recreational marijuana should not become legalized. It should be decriminalized, yes, but legalized, no, and not encouraged. I'm a doctor, and I see too many people moving on from one class of drug to another, from a lesser class of drug to a harder class, to eventually to Class A drugs. Marijuana has beneficial uses in medicine, under control. And I'm very happy to see its use being introduced into Malta for that reason. But like any drug, if the use is not regularized, if it's not regulated, then it can become harmful. That goes from a simple paracetamol to heroin. So, if there was a motion in the European Parliament, which I doubt very much there will be, because let's face it, the European Parliament has never moved against Holland, which sells marijuana openly in Amsterdam. But if there was a vote in the European Parliament to force Malta to withdraw the legalization of marijuana, I, in all conscience, being a doctor, would have to vote in favour of that motion. Second question. What is your view of European federalism and the opinion that there should be a United States of Europe? It's an interesting question. A United States of Europe would be ideal. At the end of the day, the system works very well in the United States of America. But let's face it, for it to have worked, they had to go first through a civil war due to the huge differences between the North and South, both economically and culturally. And the same thing goes for Europe. We cannot expect to have a United States of Europe while there are huge differences between the North of Europe and the South and the East. Differences in productivity, differences culturally, differences in the way the countries are run. Before those differences are narrowed, I cannot imagine a United States of Europe working. We've seen a similar situation when it came to the introduction of the euro. Some countries were more ready than others to take on the burden, economic burden of the euro. When I say economic burden, because their economies had to conform to the economies of the major countries in the EU, like France and Germany, and they did suffer. Look at Greece. So yes, I would love to see a much closer Europe, but first we have to have a much closer Europe in general, economically, etc. The other thing is, there's been a push by certain politicians to have United States of Europe. If the will doesn't come from the people, then we will have problem. So unless the people of Europe want a United States of Europe, politicians should let be. Question number 3. Do you think that EU should become an even closer union or revert back to its roots of being a united community of sovereign nation states? I do believe it should become closer. PD is part of the ALDE grouping, the Alliance of Liberals, Democrats in Europe, and we, in principle, would prefer a closer Europe. But as in the previous answer, unless we have a closer Europe in every way, economically, socially, etc., we cannot expect Europe to bind together better than it is, and the movement must come from the people. There's too much history in Europe, too many cultural differences that you cannot force people to be together. You have to give them something that makes them want to be together. What is your view of political correctness? Do you think it serves as a constraint to a free speech, or does it protect minorities against discrimination and marginalization? I am a person who advocates against hate speech. When I was PD leader, I went on record saying that I'm adamant this should not be utilised within our party. I think it is counterproductive. I think it is a form of cowardice. And I think that in the end, the people who are delivering hate speech are much worse than the people they are attacking. Now, when it comes to political correctness, we're a level lower. However, very often in this day and age, you will find that the people who are pushing for changes in terms, for politically correct speech, are not the people who are targeted by that political correctness. The minority, the grouping that are meant to be hurt by the current language, but people believe they are going to be hurt. I'll give you an example. There are countries who are pushing to stop calling Christmas Christmas because of the Muslims in their country. But if you ask any Muslim out there, they themselves celebrate the birth of Christ, and they have nothing about Christmas being Christmas. They enjoy it just as much as we do. It's people who think they don't like it who are pushing for it, not the very people who we believe are hurt by the term. And we must make a distinguish here between speech that really hurts people and speech that we are going out of our way to change so that we think we all conform together. That's a no-no for me. Question number 5. Why European politics, not local? That's a very good question. Party Democratico was formed to change the face of Malta's national politics. I was a founding member of the party, and I still believe in that. Now, for me, it was an obvious choice to make. The MEP elections are on a national basis, whereas the local council ones are not. Question number 6. With a no-deal Brexit possibility, in your opinion, what should the EU stand be with regards to the UK? Let's make it very clear. At the moment, both the UK and the European Union are playing a game of political brinkmanship. Both have their agenda. The European Union doesn't want to make it easy for Great Britain to leave the European Union for obvious reasons. They also want as great a financial package as they can possibly get. At the same time, the United Kingdom wants the best deal possible for its own citizens. That goes without standing. They must find a compromise. A hard Brexit will harm both UK and Europe. Britain is a massive net importer of European Union goods. It is the main financial centre of Europe. It is also the main destination for students of tertiary education. A hard Brexit will cause short to medium economic chaos for Britain, and it will push it further away from Europe, leading it to find, as far quickly as possible, new markets, new economic partners outside Europe, and that in the long term will harm Europe itself. Question number 7. As one may have come to realise, the country has been faced with the issue of ever-increasing rental prices, whilst wages and salaries, etc., remain quite unaltered. With this issue, will this issue, if you are elected, be voiced? Are you willing to push for the EU to regulate rental prices? Okay, let's start by making it clear that the main driver to high rental and property prices in the lower value properties in Malta at the moment, it's the cheap labour we are importing from outside the EU. This is a policy and a decision made by Maltese and can be changed by the Maltese. It doesn't need to be made within the EU itself. We are a Liberal party. We are part of a Liberal grouping. We do not believe that the rental market can be regularised by direct control, in the sense that we cannot impose rental rates on property owners. We do, however, feel that we can loosen the property market by making accommodation cheaper for those who need it. I'll give you an example. The EU gives standards for how many people can live in an apartment. There's a certain number of square meters that apartment has to have per person living in it. We know in this country at the moment there are many people, many migrant workers, not people living in Malta, migrant workers, extra EU migrant workers who are living 10 to a flat. They each pay what? €100, €150 each? And obviously they are outpricing the locals who have one household income and have to live in decent accommodation because they are really and truly living in this country. Now, if we impose those regulations on the renters, then automatically the competition for which the Maltese themselves are facing, Maltese residents are facing when coming to rent a property from these extra EU workers would be equalised, would be more on an even playing field. We also believe that we should work harder to introduce more social housing, cheaper housing units, subsidised loans for first-time property buyers, and help young people go onto the property ladder by opening up loans from banks, making it much easier for them to get loans. What is your view about the new copyright laws found in Article 13? Like everything, the devil is in the detail. Intellectual and just to explain, Article 13 is the new law that the European Parliament passed to put much more stricter rules on sharing things on the internet, be it music, be it quotes, be it a simple video, a meme. Now, the devil is in the detail. How strict these rules are will depend on how this law will work. Now, I personally am uncomfortable against anything that restricts freedom of speech and freedom of expression. But obviously, people who own certain intellectual and cultural rights need to get a return for their investment in their work. The probability is that in the current state, this law will not be passed because all of the countries in the EU still have to ratify it. And I doubt very, very, very much that some countries will pass it as it stands. Question number 9. How do you intend to address the worrying phenomena that are global warming and climate change? If there was one party in this country with AD that has an impeccable environmental record, it is Party Democratical. The ostriches are burying their head in the sand and denying that there is global warming and denying the changes we need to do in our practices to stop global warming because they are afraid that there may be economic cost to adapting to the new realities are, quite frankly, wrong. We believe that quite the opposite. We believe that if we invest in new technologies, in new industries, in new practices, which are environmentally friendly, more sustainable, have less effect on global warming, we will actually enhance our economies, stimulate our economies with new technologies. At the end of the day, we have to be forward-looking, not backwards. Fortunately, the European Union as a whole is in the forefront of this in the world, but we believe more can be done. We have to grab this opportunity that reality is making us face, that we have to change our use, lower our carbon emissions, change our practices when it comes to waste disposal, etc. Create new technologies, invent new things to make the world more sustainable. And we have to be in the forefront. We have to grab those opportunities. We have to make it work. Question number 10. What do you think can be done about the huge overpopulation problem that the world is facing right now? Overpopulation is the main reason for environmental degradation, global warming, conflict, poverty, and disease. There is only one way to stop it: education and birth control. We have to push for those countries with very high birth rates to bring them down. We in Europe once had a very high birth rate 100 years ago. We've brought it down to sustainable levels. Some may say below sustainable levels. The rest of the world has to do the same. Question number 11. What is your view on illegal immigration to Europe? Should there be stronger integration initiatives in every EU member state? Let us distinguish between illegal immigration for economic reasons and those fleeing conflict and oppression from their home countries due to war, etc. The latter should be welcomed, and every effort should be made to assimilate them in the European Union and European society as seamlessly as possible. The former should be sent home. However, reality dictates that if we do not address the issues why these people are coming to Europe, the economic migrants I'm talking about, then they will try again and again and eventually make it. We, as Europeans, have to invest in those countries so that the countries they come from offer a better future for them. They will not feel the need to go abroad. Malta was in the same situation 60 years ago, 50 years ago. The majority of young Maltese emigrated to Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, because there was nothing on offer in Malta. Malta is now a net migrant country. Why? Because we have what to offer. So countries can be turned around, and we as European Union have to work at solving the reason why they are coming to Europe, not pushing them out, so that they will try again and again and again. Question number 12. What is your view of Eurosceptic parties, mostly far right and far left, who openly preach against the European Union and its values in the European Parliament gatherings? The very values you are mentioning are the reason why we have to let them voice their opinion. They have the right to their opinion, they have the right to express it. And I share that view. 80 years ago, there was a flood of far-right and extremist parties taking over Europe due to discontent after the First World War and the massive Great Depression economic hardship there was after the Great Depression. In 2008, we suffered a similar situation when it comes economically, with a recession as great as that of the 1920s. Many people felt that the traditional parties, the traditional governments, failed to address the issue properly, protected possibly the banks and corporate Europe more than the citizens themselves, and felt disenfranchised because of this reason. We can stop the rise of the far-right parties in Europe, not by oppressing them and making them go underground, by addressing the very issues that have made them more popular and nurtured them. Question number 13. How will you approach the public transport issue in order to engage more people to use the system more frequently, ensure that it is more efficient for its users? Oh, let's make it perfectly clear. The public transport system we have quite now can never be very efficient. Not because they are not trying to, because they use the same roads that the cars use. Unless we have bus lanes on 100% of the network, which is an impossibility, physical impossibility, they will get stuck in the same traffic jams, with one disadvantage: buses cannot change their route. If I'm driving my car, I can find an alternative if I find a traffic jam instead in front of me. And that situation will not change unless we think of new solutions. What is needed is a long-term, fully holistic plan created by experts, not by appointees, that utilises every possible way of getting people around. We need to look at, to make a proper study of mass transport systems, underground, overground, whatever. We need to create new bicycle routes within the country that do not follow the main road routes, and when they do cross the main routes, go either underground or above the routes so they can be safely crossed. We need to use our waterways more. If we don't think of new ways, think outside the box, to try and create a more efficient transport system for everybody to cater for all needs, we're going to get stuck in the same logjam we are right now. Question number 14. What is your main goal as a candidate? What would you wish to work towards? Would you be elected? Okay, my main goal is to do politics like I am doing now. I don't believe in a politics of antagonism, a politics of confrontation. I believe in a politics of consensus, a politics of working together. I don't believe anybody has the ultimate solution to all problems and issues. I certainly do not. So I think what I want to do is create an atmosphere with my MEP colleagues, Maltese MEP colleagues, if I am elected, with my colleagues within ALDE and with my colleagues within the European Parliament, where we work together to find the best solutions possible that will affect in a good way as many people as possible.